You just feel yourself.
Yeah.
It's just like when you're making love with someone, you know, how you're completely, supremely with that moment. Like, that's all that's happening.
Her presence was electrifying, full of surprises, and completely indelible. On stage, Janis Joplin bled the blues, not simply sang them. An anarchy that even her supporters could not anticipate lurked under the gravel-soaked words and whiskey-soaked smile. The world regarded her demise at the young age of 27 as just another tragic rock star. The official autopsy revealed disturbing details, though. One hotel room, one last phone conversation, and a missing mark that caused more confusion than it resolved. Join us as we delve into the mysterious details of Joplin's autopsy report, uncovering long-forgotten facts that have been shrouded in mythology. This is when the truth begins to diverge from the tale. Janis Joplin's body was discovered in room 105 of the Landmark Motor Hotel in Hollywood, California, on the morning of October 4, 1970. Her road manager found out because he was worried when she didn't show up for a recording session. The scene he saw would terrify the music industry. Joplin's lifeless body was face down on the floor next to her bed, showing no obvious indications of violence. The sudden loss of her voice signified the end of a powerful and emotionally honest era in rock music. There were subtle yet revealing elements to the space itself. A fresh pack of cigarettes, some spare change, and the key to her room were among the commonplace objects scattered around. Her recent return from a quick visit to the hotel's front lobby vending machine was hinted to by these. She hadn't anticipated that the night would conclude in death. It was the type of ordinary task that gave the tragedy a horrible ordinariness. The fact that her cosmetics and pocketbook were still on the dresser suggests that she did not act frantically in her last minutes. There were no indications of a fight, break-in, or bodily harm, despite the presence of heroin paraphernalia that was later discovered at the site. No one had gotten out of bed, and the place exuded an air of calm. The coroner's findings supported the sad theory that one of the most courageous musicians of all time had died alone after an overdose, suggesting that the overdose had likely occurred in private. The stark contrast between this setting and Joplin's public persona is what makes it so unsettling. A lady whose pain appeared to explode from her with every note, she was a whirlwind of energy and intensity on stage. Dying, she remained silent. In contrast to the screams of her voice and the intense glare from the spotlight, the deserted hotel room betrayed a different narrative, one of long-suffering quiet. In addition to being the site of Janis Joplin's death, Room 105 would go down in rock history as the place where a generation felt the loss of its most vocal member. Many had assumed that Janis Joplin had died of a heroin overdose, and the official autopsy results validated it. Despite her reputation for enjoying Southern Comfort whiskey, toxicology testing found no barbiturates, stimulants, or other recreational drugs in her blood. The only things found were heroin and alcohol. The lethal dose was delivered by combining these two CNS depressants. Not only was heroin's presence cause for concern, but the substance's extreme strength stood out as particularly deadly. Narcotics from a particularly potent batch were reportedly making the rounds among Los Angeles users that week. Heroin in Joplin used to have a purity level of 40–50%, according to investigators. This was far higher than the street norm, which was usually below 10%. Even longtime users like Joplin were taken aback by this extremely pure substance. Multiple more overdoses were recorded in the same neighborhood within days of Joplin's death, clearly implying that she was not the only victim of that batch. Some heroin paraphernalia, including a syringe and a spoon with traces on it, was discovered in room 105. These findings corroborated the medical examiner's verdict that her demise was unintentional. Given Joplin's history of polydrug use, the lack of other narcotics indicated that she may have intended to take heroin for pleasure purposes solely that night, rather than for fatal purposes. She must have underestimated the potency of the chemical because there was no sign of a suicide note or previous desire to hurt herself. People pondered who supplied Joplin with the heroin and why she made the choices she did after the event. Friends and insiders wondered whether a famous dealer had sold her the batch blind, not telling her how powerful it was. The very powerful heroin that week cast a shadow over Los Angeles' nightlife and prompted broader issues about accountability in the backstreet distribution pathways, even though no one was ever officially convicted in connection with her murder. Even for the most experienced addicts, the fatal unpredictability of drug usage may be devastating. Joplin's case exemplifies this point. First responders' accounts of Janis Joplin's death included a perplexing detail. She did not appear to have any needle scars on her body. Some were skeptical since this person was commonly believed to be a habitual heroin user. This caused many to believe that she wasn't a regular injector, or that someone was trying to cover up her death before the cops came. Rumors circulated among her associates suggesting a buddy may have entered the room before rescue workers arrived, further shrouding the situation in mystery. Reports indicated that this person may have modified or deleted drug equipment, either to shield themselves from prosecution or maintain Joplin's reputation. Even though no official charges were ever brought and the stories were never proven, they became a part of music history and added a tragic twist to an already tragic situation. Completed coroner's reports often include tiny punctures from needles, the kind that could go unnoticed by first responders. The extensive scarring often observed on individuals who use intravenous fluids for an extended period of time was not present with these punctures. Another mystery was spawned by this disparity. Why were the indications of injection so little if Joplin had been injecting heroin frequently? She may have just begun heroin usage after a short break, which would explain her low tolerance and lack of noticeable physical symptoms. Decades later, the lingering mystery continues to fuel speculation. The details surrounding the injection of heroin, when, how, and by whom, as well as anyone's subsequent actions, remain unknown, even though the autopsy confirmed overdose as the cause of death. These little discrepancies give enough opportunity for suspicion, conjecture, and legend in a life as extraordinary and unfiltered as Janis Joplin's. Janis Joplin made a shocking change to her will only 2 days before she tragically passed away. A post-mortem celebration in her honor would cost $2,500, which many have since seen as a chillingly prophetic gesture on her behalf. She had arranged a party for her friends to celebrate in her honor after she passed away, not a solemn memorial service. Her inner circle might get blasted in her name at an all-night event, as specified in the clause. As per Joplin's request, the celebration took place at the Lion's Share, a pub in San Anselmo, California, which had become a favorite haunt for her. Her musical circle, which included over 200 people, got together for a night of dancing, drinking, and good times. There was a lot of joy, stories, and tears during the party, which was paid for totally by the money she had set aside. It was both an homage and a last act of rebellion. This was the only proper farewell for Joplin, the emotionally raw and hard-living artist. There was no conventional funeral. Some see the party provision as a morbid joke, while others see it as a very personal statement of her desire to be remembered, not as a sad woman, but as a spirit and music unifier. Some have speculated that she saw her death approaching since she made this modification so soon to her passing. Whether it's by design or chance, the clause gives us a window into her mental state. Biographies and retrospectives of Joplin often cite the party provision as a frank insight into her mentality in modern times. Even in death, it embodies her sense of humor, her love of social celebration, and her contempt for traditional rules. Her will was a declaration of a woman who who was adamant about how she wanted to be remembered. Not in sadness, but with music, insanity, and one last toast, in a society that often reduced her to a cartoon of disorder. Those closest to Joplin started piecing together her final timeline in the hours after her death, but they ran upon inconsistencies as they went. On the morning of October 4th, she was supposed to record vocals for Buried Alive in the Blues with her bandmates and producer. However, she mysteriously did not show up, setting off alarm bells. It was completely out of character for Joplin, who, despite her image as a wild child, devoted herself fully to her music. The road manager was tasked with checking the landmark motor hotel during her absence and discovered the unfortunate finding there. A patchwork of conflicting feelings made up her last days. In the memories of some, Janis was vivacious and full of energy for her forthcoming solo album Pearl. In the memories of others, she was lonely and emotionally depleted. For decades, people debated whether she was emotionally weak or just taken unawares by a lethal dosage of heroin, and these conflicting recollections continued the debate. After Joplin called her tour manager, John Cook, late on the evening of October 3rd, that was the last person anybody knew to have spoken to her. She came across as fine in that call. Her tone and phrases didn't hint at any unease or strangeness. She said she went outside to get some smokes before going back to her room. That insignificant conversation now serves as a terrifying clincher. She may have been unaware that she was only hours away from a lethal overdose. The lack of any distress signals, messages, or outward manifestations of worry during her last hours just adds to the surrealness and abruptness of her death. These contradictory testimonies from eyewitnesses highlight how hard it is to comprehend someone like Joplin, whose life was precariously balanced between exhilarating joy and terrible sadness. Janis Joplin's final interviews provide a chilling window into the inner turmoil that fueled her tumultuous fame. In particular, her farewell performance on The Dick Cavett Show has become an emotionally significant landmark in the annals of popular music. Even though she seemed lively, witty, and fun with Cavett and the studio audience, her countenance betrayed a hint of exhaustion. Joplin smiled and showed glimpses of vulnerability in response to Cavett's, her friend and frequent interlocutor, teasing over her wild image. She was open about the feelings of emotional isolation she had as a result of her celebrity, even though she was always surrounded by fans and other performers. Notably, she voiced her displeasure that reviewers paid more attention to her antics on stage than to her actual singing and songwriting abilities. She yearned to be appreciated for her artistic abilities, not treated like a show. Looking back, cultural observers and biographers have referred to anxious laughing, abrupt changes in tone, and hints of melancholy as indicators of more serious problems. Her passion, volatility, and emotional openness, which made her captivating, also hinted at an unspoken pain that she had difficulty expressing. Unlike the legends that have grown about her since then, these interviews are completely honest. Joplin is seen by them not as an egotistical idol, but as a woman struggling with questions of identity, legacy, and the potential emptiness that celebrity may bring. These instances serve as poignant reminders of what was overlooked, misinterpreted, or forgotten in Janis Joplin's life for a lot of fans and academics. Some of the most contentious and intricate biopic productions in Hollywood history have been the attempts to adapt Janis Joplin's life for the silver screen. The present project has sparked both enthusiasm and doubt. It stars Shailene Woodley and has a budget of $10 million, with funding coming from the California Film Commission. At issue here is who owns the rights to Joplin's music, her estate. Filmmakers confront the formidable challenge of recreating Joplin's narrative without the one thing that made her famous, her voice, if they do not obtain permission to utilize her original recordings and vocal performances. This is a well-known problem. Previous efforts to create a biography on Joplin failed due to artistic and legal constraints. One such attempt was Get It While You Can, which became involved in a lawsuit in 2015 involving Silver Reel Partners and LKL Productions. Disputes over rights, lack of financing, or creative blockages with the estate caused actress ties to Pink, Amy Adams, and Zooey Deschanel to all fail. Both artistic vision and talks taking place behind the scenes will determine the future of the present project. The film's ability to convey the story's historical and emotional reality hinges on acquiring the full rights to Joplin's music. It is possible that the biopic's credibility will be compromised and that her devoted admirers will be alienated if the producers opt to use cover versions or original compositions influenced by her style instead. This conflict has ignited more general discussions regarding the handling of famous legacies by estates. Overly controlling tributes to artists can hinder creative expression and prevent subsequent generations from fully immersing themselves in their lives and work, even though preserving their legacy is crucial. If the biopic does justice to Joplin's true essence, it has the potential to reacquaint her with new audiences and further establish her position in cultural legacy. Younger listeners may find Janis Joplin's unvarnished, raw sound unfamiliar in the modern, auto-tuned pop scene. Gen Zers grew up with well-crafted music and visual branding teams, so their emotional vulnerability, Joplin's gruff voice, and her erratic stage persona could be confusing or off-putting. Her art is characterized by a lack of polish or commercial appeal, as well as an underlying unpredictability and raw emotion that were previously lauded. People in this age of Instagram filters and TikTok's fast-paced content can mistake Joplin's unrestrained performance for sloppiness or performance. Some think that new listeners might not understand the complexity of her expression and would instead hear screams rather than relief if they aren't introduced to her work in the right way, such as through educational programs, documentaries, or carefully selected introductions. Still, there's a glimmer of optimism. Young fans looking for real truth in an artificial world may connect with Joplin's courageous candor, which may resonate with them as discussions surrounding mental health, authenticity, and emotional honesty gain momentum. Platforms that celebrate imperfection, mindful biopics, and cautious reintroductions will be crucial in bridging this generational gap. Just weeks before she passed away, Janis Joplin did something very moving. She helped pay for the burial of blues superstar Bessie Smith. In spite of her groundbreaking impact, Smith had long since been forgotten after her 1937 death and interment in an unmarked Philadelphia cemetery. A gravestone ultimately commemorating the Empress of the Blues would be financed by Joplin and Juanita Green, a former employee of Smith's who was outraged by this injustice. The inscription reads, "The greatest blues singer in the world will never stop singing." Joplin saw Bessie Smith as a spiritual leader rather than just a musical hero. Joplin discovered comfort in Smith's honest, melancholy music when she was a white adolescent in conservative Texas and felt isolated. She frequently expressed her desire to be the first white-black woman, a reflection of the profound impact of blues culture on her sense of self. Rather than being an act of charity or public relations, the decision to pay for Smith's gravestone was a show of solidarity with a woman who was racially and economically disenfranchised. It demonstrated Joplin's determination to pay tribute to those whose narratives had been concealed, whether in reality or in her imagination. Her faith in memory, truth, and the transformative power of creative heritage was on full display in this act, as it was in her music. Janis Joplin became a member of the notorious 27 Club when she passed away at the age of 27 joining Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, and Amy Winehouse. Speculation has ranged from numerology to psychological tipping points in an attempt to explain the club's disturbing trend of young, talented musicians passing away at the same age. Some commonalities that scholars have noticed include inadequate support networks, substance use, quick popularity, and early trauma. This arc was reflected in Joplin's life. She rose to popularity with insufficient emotional resources after being bullied and socially isolated as a young person, which led her to self-medicate in order to cope with low self-esteem. Just like the rest of the group, her inner turmoil went unnoticed until it was too late. She exemplifies how the business is complicit in her tale by expecting performances and public appeal at the expense of the artist's well-being. Even now, the 27 Club serves as a cautionary story and a cultural phenomenon because to the enduring contradiction between exploitation and compassion. Joplin's role in it highlights how people often look down on genius while ignoring the pain that goes along with it. No one knows what happened to Janis Joplin or how she died. Room 105's ominous silence, the autopsy's disturbing details, her prophetic will amendment, and her camaraderie with Bessie Smith all come together to form a portrait of a lady whose music is as multifaceted as her last days. She broke new ground by publicly sharing her struggles with illness and ultimately dying alone. Her narrative lives on in rock mythology. Her life and work force us to acknowledge the inherent strength of creativity, while also acknowledging the toll it can have on individuals. As we revisit Joplin's narrative, let us pay attention to the cries of pain she let out, but also to the truths that lie underlying them. Truths about justice, authenticity, and remembrance. Please like and comment if you found this exploration into Janis Joplin's last days eerie. Click on the next video to continue your trip into the dark corners of rock mythology, and don't forget to subscribe for more unseen stories from music history.